Good afternoon. I appreciate everyone being prompt and making it down to our session on bees and pollination. I know that many others will be joining us, so I think it's best for us at this time to move ahead with the program, keep the door open for those who will be joining us, and we are delighted to have an expert panel with us today to discuss the subject of what's going on with our bees. And really an all-star panel. I think what's really exceptional about it is that we have 3 practicing beekeepers, and you'll see great diversity in the scale of their operations, what you might consider of small, medium, and large. Then we have a renowned scientist, researcher, who's doing state-of-the-art, cutting-edge research on the epidemic of colony collapse disorder that we're experiencing in the country. We have a very distinguished lawyer as well, who has a great deal of experience with a variety of environmental issues. And I should start by introducing myself. My name is Keating. I'm a senior scientist with Beyond Pesticides, and I can say I'm very humbled to be here working with this panel, and very humbled to be part of the organization. It's very grateful that you're all here today. I'll start with quick introductions. The less I'm on tape, the better. The more that we can have with our experts, the better. What we're going to do in terms of format will be, I've asked each of the panelists to present about 10 minutes on what they think is most relevant information, contribution to the topic. That will allow us time at the end to expand upon what you'd like to bring to the table in terms of input or questions. And then I can also promise you a surprise at the end of the day. If you stick around to the very end, we'll have a few minutes at the end that I think you will find well worth the wait. We'll start with Ted and Becky Jones. If you're like me, my wife and I, we have a number of wedding presents that have gone in the closet from the day we got married and have never been of much use, but Ted and Becky actually received a beehive as a wedding present, and that has grown into a lifelong passion. They now manage about 300 hives here in Kentucky for pollination.
One of those key states.
I haven't moved yet.
Can you tell I'm a little homesick?
Yes.
But they produce about 21 tons of honey a year and also provide very valuable pollination services within the state. They'll be speaking first. Dave Hackenberg, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If there's something that you think might have happened in commercial beekeeping that Dave hasn't been made aware of, you might be wrong. I think Dave has a wealth of experience, as you know, and a lot to, if you can just break out of his shell, I think that we'll be able to get some valuable information here. Dr. Christian Krupke is an entomologist from Purdue University. He's published most recently a lead author on a very significant paper on the exposure of bees to neonicotinoid pesticides, primarily from corn and corn monoculture corn production that we are so attached to in this country. I also mentioned that Dr. Krupke has an extensive research background in other areas related to biotechnology and other types of commodity crop production, the environmental ills that we're exposing not only the flora and fauna of the world to, but ourselves as well, and is a very courageous leader in bringing these issues to the public. Peter Jenkins, Esquire, is a veteran of many years in Washington, D.C., working on environmental litigation. He's had senior management and program positions with Conservation International and Defenders of Wildlife, and is currently working principally for the Center for Food Safety, and was recently the lead author, I guess that was not quite the lead plaintiff, lead writer, let's put it that way, lead petitioner on a petition that was submitted to revoke or to remove the conditional registration which clothianidin, a very potent toxic neonicotinoid pesticide, has enjoyed for what we think to be an excessively long period of time. And Peter has gained a great deal of understanding in both the biological and the legal dimensions of this work and quite a bit to contribute. And then also, our last speaker today will be Mr. Robert Deschak, who comes to us from New York City. He's a beekeeper himself and has been very centrally involved in organizing the Beekeepers Association, New York Beekeepers Association. Until just recently, I think it was 2010, beekeeping was illegal in New York City. And Mr. Deschak was centrally involved in making it made legal and getting their nascent organization off the ground and reintroducing agriculture to 5 boroughs. So we're delighted that he's here with us today. And I'll turn it over to Ted and Becky.
All right, well, again, my name's Becky Jones. Glad to be here. Share a little bit. We're both officers in the Connecticut Beekeepers Association also. We have about 300 members. Our purpose is to educate new beekeepers, promote beekeeping in the state. We have workshops and things like that. We have a bee yard that we're doing some experiments now at the ag station, just on bee health and things. The business that we have, we run about 300 colonies. We do pollination, basically apples, and blueberries, and strawberries. Just in Connecticut, we don't go all over the country like Dave. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, we usually run out between 150 and 200 hives. We also raise bees. We sell bees to hobbyists in the hives. Hive-frame nucleuses. That's another part of the business. Big demand for it. I think there's approximately just shy of 3,000 beehives in Connecticut. So there's quite a few in Connecticut. There's probably 3 other beekeepers the same size as us to provide the same type of pollination. I believe it was last year we pollinated $10 million worth of apples in Connecticut. So there is an economic value to bees, contrary to popular belief. You know, you get the bigger crops out west, it's even more money. So bees are valuable. That's where our food comes from. That's what we try to impress upon people. Beekeeping has changed since we first got in it 40 years ago. You used to be able to have a hive in the backyard, and about May, you go out and make sure it was alive, and you put the honey supers on it. Really, didn't really go into it too much. When the mite came into Connecticut, that's when things changed. That was in '89. And when it first hit Connecticut, they tried to, they had a quarantine. You couldn't bring bees in or out of the state. Well, what happens, bees don't see boundary lines, and you know, the mites ended up here too, even though they were everywhere else in the country. So after that time, it's kind of changed beekeeping. You have to be more vigilant, you have to pay attention to your bees. We had the tracheal mite also, and that's seemed to disappear through selective breeding. They've become resistant on their own. But beekeeping is a lot harder today. Years ago in Connecticut, every farm had 3 or 4 hives up against the barn. But here again, the farmer never had to really do anything with it because it was easy to keep bees. So they got their pollination. Now, it's a full, you know, it's a pretty intense job besides all the other things the farmer has to do. And that's why in Connecticut, running bee colonies has become a pretty good source of income. They're also rented out for pumpkins and cucumbers. It's a big thing now, because you need bees to pollinate those things. So it keeps us pretty busy. The other thing in Connecticut, if you notice, we've been building a lot of houses. A lot of farms have gone by the wayside. So we're losing bee forage, and that's very important for bees to have bee forage. Putting in a lot of parking lots. Everybody puts herbicides on their lawns now. You don't see clover anymore in your yards. They spray along the roads, all the wildflowers and things like that. And that affects all your pollinators, not just honeybees. They all depend on those plants for pollen and nectar, which is their food. So a lot of things have changed. It's a lot harder to keep bees today. Colony collapse, to the best of my knowledge, there's been no documented cases in Connecticut. That doesn't mean there isn't some, because it's in New York and Massachusetts. We have a lot of beekeepers that aren't registered. It's a law, you're supposed to register your bees. So for some reason, it's an unenforceable law, it's a $5 fine, so people just thumb their nose at it. We do have we had a bee inspector who just passed away, but they are filling that position as we speak. The people are registered, they get their bees inspected. And the last bee inspector had no confirmed cases, but I'm sure it's here, just somebody hasn't seen it. Ourselves, we've had big bee die-offs. 2 years ago, we lost 150 colonies coming out of winter. And that was a big setback. That's 50%. And I know some beekeepers that have lost more than that, but we just had 300. You know, there's people that had 10,000 hives and lose 5,000. That's a pretty economic hit. So it's a tough business to be in and bounce back. But I guess beekeepers we don't give up, right? As far as pesticides in Connecticut, I've had instances where I've had a colony or two that have gotten hit by pesticides. If we're pollinating an orchard or something and those bees are pulled out in the orchard down the street, well, the bees will go down there and they'll get tangled up in it. But as far as mass die-offs, we haven't had a problem with that. And as far as imidacloprid, I don't believe, I've had no problems with it, to my knowledge. I know the Ag Station has been doing some research on it, but it's not a big pronounced thing like in other states. No. Losing my train of thought. Boy, that's bad. Bee health in Connecticut, it is a problem as far as foraging, and we've had droughts and things. When that happens, you lose your wildflowers, you don't get a fall honey crop, and you need that for the bees to build up to go through the winter. So if their food supply is interrupted or compromised, you're not going to have a healthy hive, and that also puts stress on the hive. That's what I was going to say. Last year, for the first time, I did not pollinate cucumbers or pumpkins, and in September, my hives look a heck of a lot better than they do normally. So there is a stress involved, especially if you're on that crop and then there's a drought, they don't have wild flowers to draw other types of pollen. You can't just have one type of pollen. Bees need diversity in their pollen sources. So we also feed them pollen supplement to give them the diversity. But weather has a lot to do with it. This year, the bees are looking real great because, 2 weeks ago it was 80 degrees here. Now it's cold out. So it's going to be interesting to see how the spring plays out. And I think that's about all I have to say now. Dave.
Our business is built around pollination mainly. I started in 1962, and my son worked for me right after high school, and then he decided to go do something else, and decided that wasn't so good, so he came back. But anyhow, try to run around 3,000 hives of bees. We do about 9,000, 9,500 rentals a year, so that means that bees are getting, trucked around the country pretty hard. Normally we take 3 or 4 semi-loads to California, about 1,600 guys in California, but when we get back, we come back into Georgia and pollinate some blueberries, and after that, our main part of our pollination on the East Coast starts, because apples is a big thing in Pennsylvania. This year they've already got froze once this week, and so I don't know how much, where we're going there, but we're definitely putting some bees in apples, but how many for sure, because Tuesday morning they were down to 18 degrees, and a lot of the trees are just about ready to bloom. So if you're this early spring wasn't good for fruit growing, but Maine, I've been working with Jasper Wyman and Son, who the oldest blueberry company in the United States, that operates out of Cherryfield, Maine. Actually, Millbridge, Maine, but Maine office part of it. I more or less ramrod, look after their pollination business. I do a part of it. I do about 3,500, 4,000 out of the 15,000 we're going to use this year and on the blueberry crop there for just them. But I kind of put the whole thing together, get all the bees rounded up, and then we pollinate quite a few pumpkins in Pennsylvania for jack-o'-lanterns, mainly Walmart. The growers are growing for, if you buy your pumpkin at Walmart, we probably pollinated your pumpkin and your gourds and everything else that you walk into the Walmart store and see. So our bees are on the move a lot, and it is, you know, it's hard on bees and it's hard on the beekeeper. Said you don't know how we do it. I mean, it's just your lifestyle. You've done this all your life, you know, and it's just part of it. You get adrenaline dumped in the way you go, and it's I don't know. It's just part of being a commercial pollinator. That's the way life is. You start working for people like apple growers and Wyman's in Maine, you know, the people that work there. I mean, it's a huge company, but, you know, it's like working for family. I mean, so, I mean, I've been there for 40-some years working for them, and the two farm managers joke with me, I know more about growing blueberries than they do. Well, I'm not sure about that. But, you know, you see people come and people pass away, and, you know, and it's just part of our lifestyle, you know, and citrus growers that you work for in Florida that are now having problems with citrus greening, which is a real thing. And, you know, they're losing their acreage to the psyllid. I mean, it's, you know, you just become part of them because you've been there so long. Besides pollinating, you know, we do produce honey in the summertime in upstate New York along the Canadian border. It's probably the only pristine place left on the East Coast that there's no corn and soybeans, or there used to not be any corn and soybeans. There used to be a few little corn growing up there. The area is kind of in the same latitude as top of South Dakota and North Dakota. We got a lot of inner south and part of South and North Dakota, and got some same kind of terrain there, and a lot of clover and alsac and trefoil grows through there, and we have some years produce some rather large crops of honey, and some years make 250,000 pounds of honey through that part of the country. But our backbone of our business is renting bees, because that's, you know, farmers are dependent on us. And unfortunately, somebody asked me a question today about monoculture. You know, well, that's unfortunately that's the way of life. There's not much I can do about it. I mean, you know, if I'm going to be a beekeeper and I'm going to pollinate crops, well, that's, you know, we've got to live with it. And so, in doing so, we've had since bites and since the chemical problems, especially which cause immune problems, we've now feed a lot of protein, something that we never did 10 years ago. And my son's got it calculated down that our average hive of bees got 45 pounds of protein last year. And so we feed protein right through the summer. A lot of guys shut down on protein, but we've found that keeping that protein on top of the hive basically makes them adult bees live longer. And what you got to understand about the life of a beehive, or the goings on of the beehive, is it's an overlap. In the winter time, a colony of bees will get down to 2,000 or 3,000 bees in a hive. And as spring starts to roll around, whether it's in the south or here in the north, that colony starts to build up, and you get an overlap in generations. And you have the winter bees that start to die off, and then the queen's laying eggs, and she's laying 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day, and that brood's hatching out. And so as that colony starts to build up, in the old days, in the colonies I showed you there this morning, 20,000, 30,000 bees in them hives. But in the height of the summer, we used to have numbers running 40,000 to 50,000 bees in a hive, because they overlap. Bees should live to be from 36 to 42 days old. And the longer you get them older bees to live, the longer time they got to go out to the field and work and gather a crop of honey. So when you got these new products, these new chemicals that are shortening up the lives, and that's how they work. And it takes 21 days from the time the egg's laid until that bee hatches out. So if you're taking that bee from 36 days down to 30 days and down to 25 days, that's when you start to see colony collapse. Because all of a sudden you got more brood, and there's bees to take care of it. And the other situation is that in that colony's makeup, all those bees have a certain job. I mean, this bee at 4 and 5 days old's got a job, and at 10 days old's got a job, and so on. So all of a sudden, when you start having bees over here that are supposed to be going to the field and working, and they're not there, now you're sending bees that should have been here in the hive, taking care of young or doing something here. Now they're going to become field bees. They're not developed. Their bodies aren't ready for that. So even though they went to the field, they're not getting the job done. They're not bringing in the food like me. And at the same token, you've got a bunch of bees that are sick. I mean, they're eating the pollen they've stored, and it's just like you and I. We got a stomach ache. You're not going to work this day. And it's just become an interesting issue that just to explain it to a lay person's kind of hard, but that's what's going on inside that hive. And so if you can extend the life of them workers 2 or 3 more days in that summer period when they're gathering honey, that 2 or 3 more days is the difference between 30 and 40 more pounds of honey that you wouldn't have got. And so instead of them feeding that pollen and that protein and feeding them to their young, they're actually eating themselves so they keep their bodies going and live long. We have, in the course of this whole thing in 06 and 07, I lay awake a lot of nights thinking about what to feed bees to bring them out. I was born and raised in agriculture and dairy farming, and I raised a lot of veal calves as a young guy growing up. And one of the things that happened to me in one of them my veal calf experience was the fact that we got scars. And I don't know if you know what scars are, but that's a bad case. That's an immune problem that causes diarrhea in calves. And it's hard to cover up. And you know, I had veterinarians and everybody else out there, and I was losing calves. And I had an old uncle, my dad's old uncle, that he was one of these guys that he was a plumber and a veterinarian and everything else, you know, the old school. I called Uncle Charlie up and I said, "Hey, Uncle Charlie, they got calves with scars." He said, "Feed them raw eggs." And literally in about 5 days, I cleaned up the problem and got calves going back to market. And so when this thing in 06 and 07, you know, I lay awake nights thinking about this, and I ended up talking to a feed guy that basically puts together feed rations for some of the largest feed companies in the United States. He had his own business. He graduated from Penn State, he was a college roommate with a neighbor of mine. And my neighbor said, "You need to call this guy. He's down in North Carolina. He got all the answers." So I called him about the first thing he told me. He knew nothing about bees. But in the course of the conversation, he said, "We use a lot of eggs in dog food, you know, give them high protein." And all of a sudden, my veal calf days came back to remembrance, and so we have come up with a concoction with brewer's yeast eggs and a lot of other things. And you can go on our website, which is not .com but .org, because somebody stole my first website. I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. And they're holding me hostage for $10,000. I can have .com back. I'm not going to give their document $10,000, but.
Dave, can I ask you to hold there?
Yep.
And is your Uncle Charlie, is he available to come down to Washington, or?
We go pick him up.
Okay. We could use somebody like that.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks all for having me. It's just been an eye-opener for me. It's also great to be back here. I went to this institution. I got a master's in environmental studies here in 1990s, and I've only been back once or twice since. So great to be here. This is a great school, and you should keep plugging into working with, because a lot of great programs here. So I work half-time now at Center for Food Safety, which, for those who don't know, is an NGO in DC that has focused mostly on sort of emerging agricultural technologies. We've got Bill Freese as our sort of science policy advisor back there. I worked there for 5 years steadily, 01 to 06, and now I'm back half-time just to focus on this bee issue, this pesticidal issue that we're all talking about today, and try to help them out on that. My other half-time is consulting. Most of my work in the last 20 years has been in wildlife conservation. So I've also worked on a bit on the GMOs and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's the perspective that I bring to this issue, and I think maybe it's been a helpful perspective, at least for me, to look at bees as part of ecosystems and really try to link them up to broader issues as well that are going on here. So, Center for Food Safety is part of a coalition that has worked along with a lot of the individual beekeepers to try to gel some action on this issue. The coalition, of course, includes Beyond Pesticides, and then PANA. Did you say PANA or PANA? PANA. Big group effort, good working coalition, and it's been a joy to be part of that, at least as far as my last 4 months working on this petition. As far as the petition itself, it's a document that we filed last week. It's basically a petition is just telling the president you want some change. I mean, that's all it is, putting it on a piece of paper and telling the president, by God, we're not happy as citizens, we want some change, and here's what you should do. It can be a precursor to litigation, but it's not necessarily a precursor to litigation. But it is an effective way of gelling the issues and trying to get the agency on the record, and hopefully creating a public file where people can file further information into it. So we expect that EPA will open a public docket on our petition. And what did the petition do? It told EPA that we thought that these issues were very serious about clothianidin in particular, that EPA had dropped the ball and blown it as far as analyzing the impacts on honeybees. And there's a lot of evidence in the record that probably a lot of you have sort of followed over the last couple of years, that EPA really did drop the ball. And also, by the way, the label is totally inadequate to prevent the harm. And also, you violated the Endangered Species Act when you didn't really look at the impact on native pollinators and non-pollinating insects, like the 18 or so threatened and endangered listed insects we have in the country. So that's sort of what the petition does. Like I said, it was a group effort. I have to say, when I started on this project in December of last year, I sort of looked at the record and the facts, and I said, well, we might have a shot at it, but we weren't really optimistic. We didn't think that the science was as strong as it needed to be. And so just over the last 4 months, though, I have to say my confidence level has just gone way up thanks to Dr. Krupke's work. His was sort of the first big thing that came along as we were drafting this petition. We said, well, I got to look at this new study that just came out, and it's talking a lot about the actual pathways by which this substance is getting spread around. Then a similar sort of study from Italy by Tapparo et al. Same sort of analysis about the way these things are getting planted is poisoning a lot of the agricultural landscape, and the planting machinery itself cannot be readily changed to reduce the harm very much. Although that's a good subject for debate and maybe one that EPA is going to have to wrestle with. But then another very important report actually came out after we filed the petition. Oh, I should mention also Dr. Pettis, who works for USDA, did a study that was published in January, I think, of this year, that talked about the fact that these neonicotinoid pesticides increase the vulnerability of honeybees to getting these pests that Dave's talking about. So they're acting synergistically with the gut parasite. So they're basically weakening the bees, their immune systems. But this is a really hot new report, by the way, that if you haven't seen it and you're into this issue, you got to get this. It's put out by Xerxes Society, and it was just released on Monday of this week. Are neonicotinoids killing bees? Xerxes is X-E-R-C-E-S. Xerxes Society is a great scientific conservation group that focuses only on invertebrates. So obviously they're very interested in pesticides and the impact of pesticides. They're based in Portland. Our coalition has cooperated a little bit with them. We've been trying to draw them into this petition, but they've kind of been doing their own thing, and so it's actually worked out pretty well because they issued this report, put it up on their website. If you're interested, you should get it. And it doesn't say the same sorts of things that we said in our petition, but it's very similar. I mean, it's focused very much on the science and the impact on native pollinators and that sort of thing, whereas our petition is more focused on the process and the law and the way EPA has blown it. But the two supplement each other quite nicely. So I was going, boy, when this came out, that was really helpful. And then just 2 days ago, as Christian pointed out, we got these new studies that are putting another jigsaw piece of the puzzle in place, which is, okay, now we know that bees are dying at field relevant levels, you know, which is what Dave is seeing in his operation. The people who are seeing bees dying in their operation are seeing, but they didn't have the scientific studies to back it up. Now we got the studies that are saying, these guys are right. They are dying because we've done controlled experiments and so on and so forth. So 2 hot new studies, one from France and one from England, and they've been front, you know, maybe not front page, but New York Times, Washington Post. Last couple of days have been really great media coverage of this issue. I just checked this morning, there were over 500 outlets, media outlets on Google News that had carried this story. And there will be more. There should be more this weekend. Should be some of those Sunday wrap-up stories. I know the Minneapolis Star-Tribune is supposed to be doing another story on it. So the media likes bees. The media is into this issue. It's a good one to keep hammering on. I'm feeling much more optimistic than I was a couple months ago. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? The petition itself, I think we need to talk about, and hopefully we can have a little more discussion about it. It's on somebody's website, isn't it? It's on Beyond Pesticides website, or
I think it's on both of our websites. Yeah, you can get to it on Beyond Pesticides.
Beyond Pesticide, and so the plan, hopefully, is that EPA will open a comment file or just a public docket, and when it does, then we'll be able to communicate that back out to all the groups that are interested in this topic. Of course, we'll circulate it out to everybody that we're working with, and then encourage people to support the petition, you know, to put in a comment in support of it, but also we want to make sure that this new science gets formally into the docket and in front of the agency. And so that's kind of the issue that we got to wrestle with, is strategically how do we take advantage of this new information. This just happened in the last week. And the new information that we know is coming out over the next couple of months, because more labs are doing the same sort of studies, Harvard and Penn State, and you name it, other researchers looking at it. And you know, at what point do we say, okay, we've got enough? Do we sue the agency? Then, you know, it gets kind of complicated on what's going to be the best way. Sometimes if the evidence is so strong, if the science becomes very strong, then litigation is maybe not the best option. Maybe a really, you know, strong public campaign would be better advice. So, you know, we're interested in potentially litigating over it, but not necessarily. There may be other ways. And I think, you know, what would really, really help is to get more and more beekeepers engaged. You know, hopefully they're taking a look at the science to get on the petition, because we can always add their names to it. So we've got to do that, and more groups. So I'm happy to answer any questions and take from that.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for your outstanding effort on the petition.
My pleasure.
Robert?
Hi, my name is Robert Deschak. I had put together a little slideshow, so that's okay to show you some pictures about urban beekeeping. I figured I'd have to get this warmed up here. I feel like I'm very happy to be here. I feel like a kid at a cocktail party, you know, surrounded by grown-ups, and not quite sure what everyone's saying, what it means. But again, like a kid at a cocktail party, I'm really happy to be here. As I think Matt inadvertently overstated my personal role in the legalization effort, I'm a member of an organization that was instrumental in getting beekeeping legalized in New York City. I personally, they're Johnny come lately, so I didn't really have a chance to contribute much to that effort. The key to getting it legalized was to overcome people's apprehension that perhaps it wasn't going to be in the public interest to legalize beekeeping. And so what our organization stressed in the course of making it legal was responsible beekeeping. And we couldn't in good conscience tell anyone that, no, they're entirely harmless, they won't hurt anything. But we have to tell people that if bees are kept responsibly, that they can be kept in an urban environment without threat to anyone or anything. So, John, hit these front lines. So I was going to run through some quick slideshow. I think I got some pictures that might be of interest. There's our friends, the bees. I didn't realize I was going to deal with such a sophisticated audience. So 200 million years ago, there were wasps. 100 million later, there were bees. Flowers developed in the last 100 million years with bees, or it was all designed and made in less than a week. I'm okay with that too. History of beekeeping. The first commercial beekeepers on record were in ancient Egypt. There is records of people moving their hives to follow different flowering crops. Now, I don't know, I don't think the historical record is clear whether they knew that this was a good thing for the farmer as well as the beekeeper. They probably figured it out, very intelligent people. But there is record that they did move them up and down the Nile to follow the different crops as the different crops came into bloom. Logs in the past were kept in log hives or gums. Right here, this is actually a contemporary picture from Africa. One of our members goes on beekeeping tours to help develop apiculture in different societies around the world. And he's recently back from Africa, but this I think was an earlier trip. Or in skeps, those things over yonder, the traditional, what people think of as a beehive. And there are a lot of people, again, no one in this audience, think that somehow bees actually build those things. And that's what a beehive is. Like paper wasps make an enormous paper thing. People think bees build that sort of thing because that's what a beehive looks like traditionally. In fact, those are skeps, those are baskets, overturned baskets in which bees were kept. Then came this man, Yale, class of 31, Divinity School, Lorenzo Langstroth, who developed the Langstroth hive and published some seminal work about what's called bee space. I won't go into the details of hive design. That's the history of hives is interesting, but I won't go into it here. He did not invent the movable frame hive, but the Langstroth hive has become the industrial standard and really revolutionized beekeeping. Then as the internal combustion engine came into use, it enabled people to move bees more readily and became the sort of modern movement of hives over long distances we see today. So, what do Paris, London, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Toronto, and of course New York City have in common? Urban beekeeping. This is in Paris. I believe that's on the Opera. London, this is on the roof of a department store. Of course, 400 Masons is a department store. It makes sense. Hong Kong, this fellow Michael Lung came to visit us recently. A great guy. He's really developing urban beekeeping in Hong Kong a lot over the last couple of years. Great fellow. And he was fascinated by coming to New York and looking around. Toronto and Tokyo. Tokyo, this is in the Ginza, in Toronto. And New York. That is Andrew Cote. I don't know if the Jones know either his father Norm or Andrew, but he's probably the most prominent beekeeper in New York City. This is on the top of a roof of Eagle Street rooftop farm. Eagle Street Farm is called in Brooklyn. So just want to run through some slides to show you some of the people involved. There's some more traditional beekeepers, and there's some urban beekeepers of today. This is Sam. He started beekeeping as a student at Columbia University at a community garden up in Harlem. And he's graduated and now working downtown, but he still keeps his bees up in Harlem. This is Ruth. Mother of 3. She keeps the bees out in Douglaston, which is just almost outside of Queens. This is Meg, an urban homesteader. She is very well known. This is Tim. He is beginning a queen breeding project and an apiary on the roof of a building in Brooklyn Navy Yard this summer. He's going to have 20 hives and about 10 mating nukes. It's quite a large scale thing in the city, whereas these gentlemen, it's a very small yard. And this is Vivian. She was a member of our group, but then she moved down to Washington this past year to work at the Justice Department. And this is Eli. Isn't he cute? The green hat and everything? Yeah, but a serious beekeeper. Eli is extremely enthusiastic, ready for any challenges. You'll see in a couple further pictures. He's now a veterinary student up in Cornell, so he actually packed up all his hives and moved them up to Ithaca. And yeah, this is Jimmy, another green hat cute. So he's out at, he has botanical gardens out in Brooklyn. This is Stacy. This is particular areas in Crown Heights. And this is, what's his name? David. David, he's the guy on your left. The guy on the right has bees, but he pays someone to take care of them. So he's a bee haver, not a beekeeper. Whereas my man David is in fact a beekeeper. And this is another David, David Graves. He is the doyen of beekeepers in New York City. At least to my knowledge, he's been keeping bees in the city since '97. He also keeps bees up in Massachusetts and in the Berkshires too. So, okay, we're getting more and more people all the time. This is a hiving demonstration held in open air in a community garden in Eastville. You can see the number of people, and here are people standing in the rain waiting to pick up their packages of bees. So, you know, they're a pretty dedicated group. And as I said, there's been a lot of interest. Our group has classes. We have had 2 sessions this year, probably about 40 people in each. So, you know, every year there's more and more. There is a package of bees for those who don't know what a package of bees looks like. And there's some bee-related tattoos because it's kind of a gritty urban thing. There's some beekeepers on the street. That's Sam Comfort. I don't know if anybody in the beekeeping around here knows Sam. Yeah, he's a bit of a wild man. He does get into the city every now and then. The bees wax blades on his truck. Yeah, he's a good guy. Okay, so the places. So this is ideal hive placement, you know, prevailing winds, dapple sunlight, water source, good drainage. Yeah, you know, this is so this is a New York City apiary. I mean, a New York apiary, not New York City. This is in Putnam County, but this is like your apiary from Central Casting. You know, on a hill, dappled sunlight. It's got a top bar hive that'll make you go blind if you look at it too much. But there's a Kirchhoff hive over there on the left, which I think is really cool. We won't get into that. This is more typical. This is on the rooftop, on a rooftop of a convent in the Bronx. Produces some of the best honey in New York City because this is my little bee yard here. I've only got 4 colonies, so like I said, I'm a kid at the cocktail party with these grown-ups. This is that shot again. I know you don't want to look at Andrew again, but it's a great view of the city. Again, this is in Brooklyn. This is a place called the Brooklyn Grange, which bizarrely enough is actually in Queens.
Yeah.
And Brooklyn Grange is there. Tim is kind of the project in Brooklyn Navy Yard being kind of run with, sponsored by the Brooklyn Grange, which, as I said, is in Queens. You can see it in the back there. And there's Sam and some others just hanging out at Brooklyn. It's the same place at Brooklyn Grange. Okay, this is on Jewel Street, just a rooftop in Brooklyn. This is Meg Pasco's place, like I said, a Brooklyn homesteader. And there she is holding the frame up for the honey shot. And of course, you can see the Empire State Building in the background. If you can't see the Empire State Building from your bee yard, it's not really urban beekeeping. Here's the Brooklyn Bridge. This is Andrew. This, on the other hand, I keep my bees on top of a convent. This is on top of a former brothel. You can draw your own conclusions about our respective moral character there. Okay, this is David's place in Brooklyn. This is right downtown Brooklyn. You can see another bridge shot. I think it's of Arizona Narrows up there on the left. To my knowledge, and again, I'm not an expert, but to my knowledge, in New York City, this is the highest apiary. This is on the 13th floor. And last year he had a pretty good, you know, the conventional wisdom is you don't go that high, but he had a pretty good year last year. He had an unfortunate winter, but a good year. So another angle looking against it, looking across. I think that's Governor's Island in the foreground, if I'm not mistaken, for anybody who's up on New York geography. This is near Union Square. You can see this is kind of a typical urban space. You got to stick where you can, so you know, as long as the bees can fly out over there, it doesn't matter how narrow it is. It's kind of inconvenient to work the bees there. That's Andrew and Adam. This is the same yard. You can see how narrow it is. You really don't have any space at all to fool around. This is, I think you saw the shot before. This is out in Douglas, and it looks like a jump, but actually it is in the 5 boroughs. This is someone's balcony, private residence in Chelsea, and Empire State Building in the background. This is around, I'm going to say 16th Street, the Ladies Mile. This is Sam again. This is on the roof of the Bowery Poetry Club. Top bar high because that's the way poets roll. And these are some of the most dangerous bees on earth. because these bees have lawyers. This is on the Natural Resource Defense Council.
Oh, right.
And that is Vivian. They are physically some of the most beautiful hives. I mean, they're really beautiful woodwork and everything. But and they also had a very successful year. So bees with lawyers. This is in a community garden down by Battery Park. You can see how close it is to the public. But again, I don't think they've had any problems. And this is, you can see, it's almost looks like an abandoned lot, but I think it's actually a community garden. Yeah. And this is in East New York. And this is in Narrows Botanical Gardens. This is actually looking out my office window. I work in Long Island City, and I was actually looking out the window with my boss, and he's like, "What do you think those things are over there?" I said, looked out and pretended I didn't know they were there. I said, "Oh, I think those look like beehives." And he looked, and he said, "I can't see any bees." I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe they're not then." So and this is looking back towards the city from that roof. So that was in Long Island City. Another example of being unobtrusive. This is a restaurant called Babo, and you can see, there's just your typical balcony. And there's a chimney there. But unbeknownst to the passerby, right at the foot of that chimney, there's my man Chase Emmons putting a hive in place there. And again, have to finish up with the Dean of the Beekeepers, David Graves, up on Manhattan. Nice shot. Okay, heroic action shot for the transition. So the urban challenges of beekeeping, like everything else in New York City, it's all about real estate. Finding a place is very difficult. Our group has a little matchmaking service we call Bee Harmony, where people who have a place and want bees and bees in one place try to put the two together, and it's been pretty successful. So there are community gardens that want to have bees, and there are people that say, "Gee, I'll go anywhere to have bees." So, for instance, I have to commute an hour each way on the subway. I take the subway to see my bees. So this is what you can get into. Is they found a place where they had a hive up on the roof, and then the guy moved, and they had to move the bees. But the only way to get it down is to a rope. First, they had to dump it over the edge onto this landing of the fire escape, and then go down to the fire escape and lower it down. And this is a full hive with 4 up. So it's about 250 pounds, and all they got is a rope. So it can be entertaining. Somewhat better is having to go through the hatch. And again, when you're putting empty boxes and foundation stuff up, that's not a problem. But when it comes to harvest time and you're trying to get full boxes down, it's kind of a pain in the neck. This is the same hatch, different view. But like in New York, of course, if you have the means, there is an easy way to do it too. You box them up, put them on the thing, wheel it through the lobby, get on the elevator, and take it right up. This is actually on the way to Brooklyn Grange. This is a hive that's given, again, that's Chase. So the other urban challenge is neighbors and trying not to alarm the neighbors. Ideally, they wouldn't know you're there. And one thing that can alarm the neighbors is on hot nights, there's a behavior known as bearding, where the bees just kind of are around like a sheet or a curtain on the outside of the hive. It's no big deal, but to civilians may find this alarming. So a lot of times to keep people from getting alarmed, you may want to make sure the hives are out of sight, or you may want to make sure you educate the neighbors. The most thing that what alarms people the most, however, is swarms. So again, you all know a swarm is a way one colony makes another colony. It's where a colony divides, a natural behavior that can be controlled with to some extent, with good beekeeping and paying attention to what's going on. That's a swarm has left the hive and is clustered there while their scouts are out looking for a new home. That's close up of the hive. So that's a swarm in the classic tradition. As you see, there's a tree there. This is in the Bronx. There it is. What do you do? Cut off the branch, put it in a bucket. You have the queen. You leave the bucket there so the stragglers can come in, box it up, take it away. So less traditional, more urban swarms. Never quite this bad. But there's a box swarm. Yeah, this, let me see, get the addresses right. For those who know New York City, this was Grand and Mulberry, right downtown. So all over there, and they're just hanging out. There's some small number of bees flying around looking for a place to home, but the rest of them are just chilling, waiting for the scouts to come back and tell everyone, come on, I found a place, come with me. So of course they have cops standing around. I was told by a beekeeper that if you ever are responding to a swarm and you don't want the NYPD to interfere with you, what you immediately do is get as close to the bees as possible. because the cops will stay far away from you, and they'll yell at you, but they won't do anything. And of course, someone's got to take a picture on their phone. In fact, many people are taking pictures on their phone. And then Eli, I told you, he's a hell of a guy. He shows up, and he and the NYPD actually has someone on their staff that is a beekeeper, Tony Planakas. Great guy. They call him Tony Bees in the department apparently. But so Tony showed up and told the cops that yeah, this kid's okay. He's with me, and they're looking for the queen. They found the queen, and then they boxed and sent him along. There's the stoplight swarm. Let's see, this one, Elizabeth and Hester Street, also downtown. You can see the top of that stoplight. This is the view from the bees hat, looking down on the people. So we back the truck up underneath. We call a farmer, and you know he's a farmer because it says right on the back. And they get the bees off the stoplight. This is City Fire Escape Swarm. This was up in Washington Heights in northern Manhattan. And Eli, he's always quick on the draw. He loves chasing after swarms. And he gets his bee brush. You can see the yellow brush. They're brushing the bees into a box. And he got them. He kept them in his parents' place. This is what I call the Chinese lantern swarm. This is down in Chinatown. And this was on Mott Street, but you can see that is a cluster of bees. And again, the police respond. And of course, this is in all the newspapers. So, I mean, newspapers, websites, New York Times got a couple of them. But I would undertake by this. This is a tower truck. And how long the extension is. So I go up 3 stories because the firemen don't like the bees any more than the cops do. But this is a Tony said this was one of the largest swarms he ever bagged. He said this was about 5 pounds of bees.
Wow.
So again, that's Tony getting them in a bucket and taking them away. And that's I think after this he and Andrew were getting arrested. Imagine who was taking them home. But no, Tony took them home. So this is what I call the fancy schmancy swarm. You can see it's right in front of Bulgarians. 57th and 5th on a weekday in the afternoon. So this got a lot of, so it's right in front of Bulgarians, the priciest retail in the world. And there was right on a sidewalk tree, there was a bunch of bees. So that was taken care of. We love swarms because they are free bees, literally. So if some beekeepers bee swarms and you find them, you take them home. There are also a lesser issue is quote unquote feral hives, that is to say somebody's bees escaped and did find their home, and then later after the colony is established, someone said, please get these bees out of here. Sometimes in the course of the storm, you see this tree fell over, then they were cutting off the tree, and they said, oh my God, there's bees in this tree. So again, the same farmer shows up.
Yeah, t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Shows up and sealed it up and cut it down. This was one that was also written up in the New York Times. This was in Fort Greene after Hurricane Irene, where people were walking through and said, oh my God, look at this branch on the ground, it's full of bees. And some beekeepers showed up because there are a lot of beekeepers around that area of town. And then they said, look, up there, there's the other half of the hive that's still in the tree. And some beekeepers responded, and one showed up and had a plan on how to do it. And the first person said, well, I saw them first, they're mine. And they're arguing over whose bees there are. But finally, the guy who actually had a plan and the equipment to get it down, he actually got to keep them. But there were people squabbling, they saw it first. This is actually up in the tree. And again, the police, Tony showed up and they got in a bucket and put once again, this is Dee's idea, put it with a hunting sock, giant on the slice, I think what it is, but perhaps a hunter can tell me, but a elastic sort of sheath over it, and then this is it on the ground after and then when they got it down, they took the sock off and put this mesh over it so the bees can breathe, and then they ended up, I believe, dividing it home. There's another thing which is known as cutouts, which means it's a feral hive that actually is in a place that is a habitation. So there's a church in Queens, and this is in July this past year, and they looked and saw on top of their air conditioner there's this sticky stuff. What the hell is that? And they look up and they see it's coming down the walls, and it's honey. That's honey running down the walls of the church and cooling on top of that air conditioner. And they could see, because it was very hot in July, you can see the bees are kind of bearding outside of their hive. So you gotta call Eli, of course. He responds, and he's like, now he's on top of the, he's actually on the gutter here. And if Eli falls, that's where he ends up. So Eli's a bit of that. Anyway, we pull the metal and wood off. You can see these are all combs of honey. So they ended up removing this at the church's request. It was about 150 pounds of wax and honey out of this.
Wow.
Yeah.
They've been there for a long time.
Yes, they've been there quite a while. This is, I see a small hole in the wall, it's no big deal. Well, there's, there's bees coming out of it. About 35 feet up. But in the apartment, they had heard that they figured out there were bees in the wall, so they called some people in and they took a hammer to it and broke out the wall. You can see inside. Yeah. So you don't want your bees to swarm. A, they might alarm people, and B, if they do find another home on their own, it's probably not going to be where anybody wants it to be. Then there was something else that was up in the tiny.
Famous red honey.
Yes, the famous red honey incident. If you all hadn't heard.
Yeah.
This is David Seelig. He's a restaurateur. He's got a very good restaurant called Rice. But he's keeping bees in a place called, oddly enough, Red Hook in Brooklyn. There's a lot of beekeepers in Red Hook. But he pulled a frame of honey out, and look at that. And this is some close-ups of it. And there are a number of beekeepers that actually reported this same thing. It's like, well, what's going on? How can this be? And you can see that I wish I had a shot. They actually had the bees are gorged on this stuff, and they're translucent. So the bees are actually red. And I know this fellow had a shot. He couldn't get a hold of them. He actually had a single bee with the sun shining. It was beautiful because the whole bee was like lights up red. Alarming, but very cool. But you can see there where the arrow's indicating. Well, turns out there's a maraschino cherry factory. Founded in 1948, and they were kind of careless about disposing of their red dye 40 corn syrup. And they've been there since 48. Red Hook is now like a hotspot of urban beekeeping, and some people think there are too many bees in Red Hook. And of course they descend on it because the bees don't say, oh my God, that's red dye 40. They say, look, food. And they were feeding on this somewhat improperly disposed of corn syrup. Anyway, they squared away because these guys weren't that happy about going out in their backyard and having all these bees all over the place. So they come to an arrangement so there's no more red bees, hopefully. So this is Mike from Hong Kong came up with this. He's a design expert. So this is his, he was very happy to visit New York. So urban beekeeping, it's a good thing. She had, Martha had Andrew on the show. That really is anything that looks like a wax statue. She does have bees, yes. And I think for a number of years, actually, Andrew's father kept them for her. But they had a honey tasting of the different urban honeys, and I don't know, she liked the Bronx honey best. Okay, so these are some of the people I talked about: Backwoods Beekeeping, Brooklyn Farmyards, Burrow Bees, Brooklyn Grange, Brooklyn Homesteader. This is a great website with pictures of urban beekeeping all around the world, amazing stuff. And this is Mike's site, Hong Kong Honey, of course. Down at the bottom, that's us. If you're ever in town, every first Tuesday of every month, we have a meeting. We have different speakers come and present on different topics. And that was my presentation. What I wanted to mention to kind of bring it back, because about the issue of pesticides, a couple things. In the city, we're in a non-agricultural setting. So our honey isn't necessarily called wildflower honey because our bees go to a variety of sources of what's available. And if there are pesticides which are used primarily for agricultural applications, those are not something our bees are likely to encounter. Bee flies about 3 miles in each direction, so doing the math, that's about 27 square miles. New York City is about, I think, like 400, 450 square miles. So in many cases, our bees don't get out the city limits. So if it's something that's really an agricultural application, it's something our bees won't encounter. The other problem is that we don't really have a population of bees to see the effects of these things on. We have many small populations. So personally, I've got 4 hives. Another guy has 2, another person has 1. So it's not as if there's one beekeeper that keeps all the bees in New York and can see the effect on a population of several hundred. It's very small populations. And also, we are not expert beekeepers, as these people are, whereas if they see something weird is happening, they know something weird is happening. I see something weird is happening. I don't know if it's weird or whether just because I'm familiar with it doesn't mean it's weird. It could very well be my own inexperience. So when we have beekeepers complaining about, oh, my bees died, well, a very large part of that could be their own inexperience. Could be normal bad luck. Or it could be, God forbid, some pesticides. The one direct experience we do have with pesticides is they did some spraying for West Nile virus. And the pesticide they use is Anvil 10+10, which is
Sinithrin.
okay. So we would warn our people, the city would put out notices, and we would put out notices to our folks. And basically all you can do is they spray sometime between dawn and dusk. You feed your bees, screen them in, try not to have them overheat, and screen them in right at the dusk of the spraying, try to keep them in for a couple of days and then let them out. That's the best we can do. No one reported having losses due to that, though I'm told that it could be deadly if you didn't take precautions.
Robert,
Yes.
can we open up the floor?
Certainly. That was really the end of my statement. Again, thank you so much for having me here. It's been an honor.